Aloha and welcome back to our fall 2021 University of Hawaii at Hilo professional internship talks for the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Science graduate program. Our next guest speaker is our graduate student will be Michael D. Stone. And to introduce him today will be his mentor, Megan Lamson Letterman. It's my privilege to introduce you all to Megan. She is an alum of the TCBS program, having been part of the 2006 cohort. When she was here, she studied the fish ecology in the near shore in Ka'u, where she brought in the community and did community-based marine resource management. Soon afterwards, or maybe even during her graduate program, she began working with the Hawai'i Wildlife Fund and has been coordinating their Hawaii Island marine debris program, removal program since then. And also working with the Ancholine Restoration Project in Southeast Hawaii. She is now the Hawai'i Wildlife Fund board president and also the program director for Hawaii. So without further ado, Megan, the floor is yours.
Sorry, hopefully you can hear me. It's not too patchy with my off-grid internet, but aloha, Lisa, thank you for the introduction. And I am very pleased and proud to introduce Michael David Stone, who has volunteered well over 700 hours to protect native wildlife and restore coastal habitat during his 2-year internship with Hawai'i Wildlife Fund on Hawai'i Island and an extra month on Maui. And as you'll see, Mike is a fabulous educator and he's been a great asset and contribution to our team. So if you haven't had the honor of meeting him, he was born and raised in Northern California, grew up visiting nearby national forests and lakes and mountains, which launched him into an endless search for adventure and inspired his passion for nature. He studied abroad in Australia for a semester and graduated from Sonoma State University in 2019 with a degree in environmental studies. Like Lisa already mentioned, Mike is currently a Master of Science student within the TCBS program at the University of Hawaii at Hilo via the internship track. And for the past 25.5 months, he's interned with us to help protect native wildlife through research, education, conservation, and advocacy projects. He aspires to explore and contribute to the world around him, experiencing new areas, cultures, biomes, and environments along the way. His goal is to continue working in the field of conservation with the aim to educate communities and to advocate for the environmental issues that are impacting them. And we wish him lots of luck as he continues his efforts and his adventures, and are selfishly hoping that he stays on island after graduation, hint, hint. And so with that, Mike, you're up to present your talk entitled Addressing the Issue of Marine Debris Through Restoration and Advocacy with Hawai'i Wildlife Fund. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Megan. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to mention, Kelly, great job for your presentation. Frankly, a tough act to follow, but I'll give it my best shot. Anyways, aloha everyone, and mahalo for attending my TCBS professional internship presentation, where today I will be discussing my internship journey with the nonprofit organization, Hawai'i Wildlife Fund. And I'm beyond excited and thankful to be speaking to you all today. And quite frankly, I didn't expect this many people to come to the talk, and I'm very excited for it. I just wish I could be in person so I could see everyone's face, but you know, it's unfortunate times. You got to do what you got to do. Anyways, if I can see your guys' face, that would be wonderful. If not, it's 2021. I can't force you really to do anything, but it just helps so I don't feel like I'm talking to a blank screen. However, I have plenty of great information that I hope you guys all find interesting and informative. So since I have a short amount of time, let's get started. So here's a quick outline of what I'll be discussing in today's talk. I'll briefly talk about my journey into the field of conservation, thus leading into the field of marine debris. And then I'll give you a little background on marine debris and just how our plastic pollution and the global implications regarding our waste management systems, just how they're all interconnected. And then I'll introduce my professional internship agency, Hawai'i Wildlife Fund, and all the wonderful conservation work in which they do. And then I'll discuss my work with removal, research, outreach, and legislation within this internship. And like Megan mentioned earlier, I was lucky enough to spend some time in Maui helping the team there, and there's no way I could give this talk and not talk about the work done there. And then I'll wrap it up with the conclusion. So first off, what led me into the field of conservation and then marine debris? Well, I'm sure that most people who are in the field of conservation know that there's this common theme of doom and gloom or hopelessness. You know, we learn about all these issues, and I personally witnessed the wildfires in California to the coral bleaching in Australia and in Hawaii. And I wanted to make a difference on these issues rather than pondering about how unfortunate they are. And I just recently became a nephew, and I was thinking, when my nephew's generation sees how we treated the planet, I want him to know that his uncle made a difference on these issues, or at least tried to make a difference on these issues. Which during my time in undergrad, I volunteered with local dive shops to remove problematic urchins in order to stabilize abalone populations in California. And also during my time for the Center of Environmental Inquiry, I took on a role of project leader for fire safety within wildland urban interfaces to better equip these landowners in these high-risk fire zones, which includes my parents. And I also removed, in my opinion, a record-setting amount of invasive plant species from several locations around California during my land management internship. So when I moved to Hawaii, I knew I wanted to help preserve the beauty of this island in any way that I could. And after witnessing the raw beauty of this island, it was much more difficult to experience the issue of humans' unsustainable waste culture leading to marine debris on this island. So I witnessed this issue in person during my first beach cleanup with Hawai'i Wildlife Fund on October 19th, 2019 at Camilo Point, or Laio Camilo, here on Southeast Hawaii, which has been ranked one of the dirtiest beaches in the world, which some of you might know this beach as Trash Beach or Plastic Beach. However, we really don't like calling it that because this area has so much more to offer, which I'll talk about later in this presentation. However, during this cleanup, we'd find trash from essentially all over the world, and there's no signs that this issue is going to stop. And one day, we removed truckloads of marine debris from this beach, and I was told that within no time, it'd become relittered, which made me just want to act on this issue even more. However, if you think about it in the grand schemes of things, no amount of beach cleanups that we conduct are going to stop this issue of marine debris. 80% of marine debris comes from land, so our efforts need to focus on getting rid of it at the source, or what we say in the field, turning off the tap, as the only way of preventing it from getting into the ocean in the first place. We like to use the sink analogy. If your bathroom sink is overflowing, you don't reach for the mop to soak it up first. You have to first turn off the tap, or you'll be mopping all night. And this is kind of what we need to do with marine debris. However, after learning about the severity and complexity of this issue, feels like it's not just the sink overflowing, it's also the toilet and the shower, and all we got is fast food napkins, and we're scrambling. Which brings me to the question of what does one awkward broke graduate student with a great mustache do about turning off the tap? Well, before I answer that question, I should give you a little more insight of this issue in general. So what is marine debris? The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA's definition of marine debris is any human-made object that finds its way into an ocean or waterway. And this comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, from water bottles, vacuum cleaners, to children toys, refrigerators, explosive ordinances. Yes, we have found explosive ordnance during one of our cleanups, and I heard that the volunteer actually brought it to the rest of the group, so now we have to warn volunteers, if you find them, leave it there, don't touch it. And even messages in bottles. Yes, there is a message in that bottle if you look closely. And we've also found used containers, license plates. This license plate, when we found it, was actually still valid at the time of finding it, to entire derelict fishing vessels, to even 1-ton net bundles, like you can see here. However, it goes without mentioning that plastic pollution is a key ingredient in what makes a bulk of the lasting harmful marine debris that we find in our oceans. And as much as I do want to say that plastic use is negative, it just isn't true. Research shows that humans have been benefiting from the materials that are today termed plastic since around 1600 BC, when ancient Mesoamericans developed methods to process these natural rubbers into figurines and bands. And they're undoubtedly useful and have indeed improved the quality of life for many people by providing clean drinking water to be distributed to those in need, to keeping packaged food fresh for longer periods of time, to providing more readily accessible and safer medical equipment, to even reducing the carbon emission from vehicles by decreasing their weight for traveling or transporting goods. And for us to say that our future will not rely heavily on the continuous use of plastics at this point is just simply unpractical. I'm willing to bet that there's some sort of plastic within arm's reach of all of you sitting at home. I actually specifically made sure to remove all my plastic. So but I'm sure there's plastic around all of you sitting at home. It's almost impossible not to have it. And in just 2020, the global plastic market was valued at $568.7 billion. And the plastic industry is thriving globally with nearly every country engaging in the use of plastics. And today there's around 6 main categories of plastic that make up a bulk of production. And as you can see in this graph, there's dozens of industries that rely heavily on plastics. And these industries are all forecasted to grow within time. However, it's important to note that packaging makes up for almost 40% of this industry, and polyethylene, PE, being the most popular type of plastic used in packaging. And most of this packaging falls under the single-use plastic category, which is used once and will likely last anywhere from 20 to 500 years, making our reliance on the single-use plastic so devastating. It was estimated that around each year we produce around 300 million tons of plastic, which, to put that into perspective, in 2013, they estimated that the entire weight of the human population was around 316 million tons. So in just 1 year, we produce roughly the same amount of weight as the entire human population. And in 2020 alone, they've expected that around 15 million tons of plastics entered our oceans, and it's expected to be around 29 million tons by the year 2040. And it's sad to say, but just about everywhere that scientists have looked, from the Arctic to the Antarctic to the deepest point of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, they have found traces of humans' plastic pollution. And our waste is being consumed by everything from the smallest plankton to the great whales, making this terrifying. A 2015 publication showed that around 690 species of marine wildlife interact with marine debris. And then research also shows that around 90% of seabirds contain some type of trash in their guts. And not only is consumption of trash killing wildlife, but it's also altering their behavior in worrisome ways, with a record amount of whales washing up all over the globe with plastics in their stomach. In 2019 alone, there's 34 dead whales that washed along the shore of California, all of which with evidence of plastic consumption. And this goes without mentioning the number of marine wildlife issues associated with entanglement. They have estimated by the year 2050, the amount of trash in the ocean will outweigh the fish. And studies have shown that adults are consuming around a credit card's worth of plastic each week, and these microplastics have been discovered in humans' lungs, feces, and placentas, with troubling implications for humans' health. And let me repeat that statement because I couldn't see your faces, but I'm assuming you're all shocked. Humans consume a credit card's worth of plastic each week. Absolutely terrifying. Like I mentioned before, 80% of marine debris comes from land, so our efforts need to focus on getting rid of it at the source before it gets into the ocean in the first place. And recycling has become a part of our culture, but sadly, it's not the solution that we are promised. Another study conducted by research showed that of all the plastics ever produced on this planet, only 9% have been properly recycled. So no waste management system in the world is equipped to deal with just the sheer amount of plastics being produced, which begs the question, where does the other 91% of produced plastics go? Well, a majority of plastics either end up incinerated, which releases toxic chemicals into the atmosphere during this process, or ends up filling our landfills or scattered throughout terrestrial and marine environments, which is particularly worrisome because around 50% of all plastics produced are hazardous. So when this plastic waste is getting sent to our landfills or scattered in our environments, it can also discharge toxic chemicals into their surrounding ecosystems. And this toxic chemicals can pollute these ecosystems for long periods of time. And going back to turning off the tap, like I mentioned earlier, research found that around 10 river catchments account for roughly 88 to 94% of the plastic in the world's oceans, 8 of which are in Asia and 2 of which are in Africa. However, before we start pointing the fingers, it's important to note that China was purchasing over 70% of the globe's plastic until late 2019, and then it decided it would no longer accept foreign plastics. And this is why, as of October 16th, 2019, plastic materials were no longer accepted on this island of Hawaii. And so much of this mixed recycling plastics that the US market sends away for recycling went to some of these same regions in Asia. So who's to say that a certain fraction of this river debris was not just mismanaged plastic coming from the US? And while the US is frantically searching for a new place to stash our waste, we have started incinerating around 14% of plastics produced on US soil, which, like I mentioned before, has troubling implications. And this issue is severe, and working with Hawai'i Wildlife Fund has led me to become more knowledgeable and passionate about this issue. Hawai'i Wildlife Fund is a 501(c) nonprofit organization in Hawaii with a mission to protect native wildlife, focusing on coastal and marine wildlife species in the Hawaiian Islands. And it was founded in Oahu in 1996, but now HWF mostly works on the islands of Maui and Hawaii. And they're currently working on dozens of conservation projects on these two islands, which I was lucky enough to be a part of several of them, which I'll talk about later. However, the marine debris removal project is where I spent a majority of my 700 internship hours working on, and also not to mention their impressive legislative involvement background, which I'll be discussing in more detail shortly. It's interesting because Hawai'i Wildlife Fund originally wasn't in the market for dealing with marine debris in the first place. Their co-founder, Bill Gilmartin, who's an absolute legend in the field of conservation, and he's also considered the godfather to Hawaiian monk seals, was monitoring a Hawaiian monk seal pup in Camilo and was surrounded by mountains of debris. And he decided that he had to take matters into his own hands. And since 1996, Hawai'i Wildlife Fund has removed around 360 tons of plastic pollution from the shores of the Hawaiian archipelagos. And out of that 360, we have removed around 310 tons from Hawaii Island alone. So with that being said, Hawai'i Wildlife Fund has hosted removal efforts in several different sites, essentially throughout this entire island, as you can see on this graph. However, most of the marine debris pollution collected comes from the district of Ka'u. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this island, it's on the southeastern facing shore of the windward side of the island. And why is so much debris being accumulated there? Well, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term garbage patches, but for those of you who aren't, they're formed due to a large system of rotating ocean currents known as gyres. And the biggest garbage patch of them all being the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is in between California and Hawaii, whose estimated size is around 3 times the size of France. And within these massive gyres are smaller convergence zones in the center. And unfortunately for the Hawaiian archipelago, it's in close proximity to the North Pacific subtropical convergence zones. And based on either the seasons or storm events, this can impact the flow of marine debris and this part of the island. And here's a photo of the southeastern facing shore, Camilo, which I mentioned earlier. And I think it's important to note that this area and the surrounding coastline provides habitat to several endemic species, including the endangered Hawaiian monk seals, which they've estimated there's only around 1,400 of them left, as well as the endangered Hawaiian yellow-faced bee. And furthermore, this area is vital due to its endemic red pool shrimp, Opaiula, that live in these large ankyline pools that you could see here. And I just think that this area needs to be recognized for all of its native plants and its raw beauty. So I think rather than it for its recognition for trash or plastic, it should be recognized for its increased biodiversity. And when it comes to marine debris removal, we have several methods, first of which is our most common and popular method, which is the community cleanups. Although with COVID times, it's been increasingly difficult to get these groups to the beach, volunteers from the community have proven to be their best assets in removing marine debris, with about 95% of our efforts being volunteer powered. And these community cleanups are also powerful experiences because we can outlet these educate these guests on the issues associated with marine debris, kind of like how I got involved with the team in the first place. And next we have the Noaa Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project, where we conducted regular Noaa surveys at a given 100-meter beach site at Camilo Point. And we recently had just conducted our 50th survey, where we averaged around 2,000 pieces of plastic per survey. And then once we analyze this data. It'll be sent to the MDMAP website where it can be analyzed with the marine debris data expanding the globe. And I just thought this was a great quantitative approach to just find out how much debris was found at each of these sites. And as you can see on this graph, there has been a downward trend of debris that we've been finding during these surveys. And there's several factors of why this could be. And we think it's going to be because there's been an increase of activity in this part of the island. And there's been also community cleanup efforts, not just from Hawai'i Wildlife Fund. And during these surveys, we found that around 94.4% of the materials collected during them are indeed plastic. And next we have net patrols, which then we would take smaller groups to target areas of high debris accumulation or scout out other potential cleanup sites. And when conducting these net patrols, it's very common for us to find these massive fishing nets. And once we collect these fishing nets, they'll then be transported to the Waiuhinu transfer station where they've been so kind to allow us to store these nets. And this nest pile that you see here for the most part was just from March 2020, when historically these nets make up for roughly 51% of the debris that we find from our shores in this island. And once they're there, they'll eventually be placed into storage bins and then delivered to H-Power in Oahu, which is this great program that turns fishing nets into energy. And in total, since 2005, we have shipped around 13 40-foot containers with an average of around 8 tons per container, weighing over 100 tons that we've sent to Oahu for this partnership, which is enough to power over 40 homes in Oahu for an entire year. However, we do recognize through this program, they burn nets to make energy, and we obviously, that's not the best solution. However, it's better than letting these nets accumulate on our shores. So for our cleanups, macroplastics are generally the most popular category of item collected, being any piece of plastic that's greater than 5 millimeters in size, which our cleanup efforts are generally pretty effective at removing from these beaches, which leads us to microplastic. Get it? Because my name is Mike. Never mind. Anyways, microplastics are being defined as anything less than 5 millimeters in size. And we have this saying in the marine debris community that plastics don't break down, they break up. They break into more pieces. And there's just really not a efficient way to remove these microplastics from the beaches, at least during these volunteer cleanups, which has led us to the Ho'ola one. We teamed up with 12 mechanical engineering students from the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec, Canada, who created the Ho'ola one, which is an award-winning machine that sifts out even the smallest microplastics from our beaches. And I was fortunate enough to conduct a podcast-style interview with one of the head engineers and co-founders, Jean Felix, just about this project and everything that went into it, the struggles and the future aspirations of this project. And if you'd like to listen to this podcast, you can shoot me an email after the presentation, and I'll gladly share it with you. So this Ho'ola one machine was donated to our efforts here on the Big Island, and we got a few opportunities to experience this machine in action, and it was incredible. The machine uses a vacuum system to collect both sands and microplastics from the beach, which you saw Megan doing in the last slide. And then it separates the two with a decantination system. And for those who aren't familiar with this process, it separates the components of a mixture based on the differences of density, sand being dense and non-buoyant, and microplastic particles being less dense and buoyant, naturally filtering the two when displaced in water. And we actually found that this machine is around 99% effective in the removal of microplastics from our beaches, which leads me to the research efforts of this internship. We conducted a brands inventory survey where we had collected brand name, material, item type, and origin of waste that washed up ashore of our Hawaii beach roughly from 2013 to 2021. We did it on and off, but we started doing it again much more vigorously around 2019. And this study was conducted just to understand which manufacturers specifically were polluting our shores and how to better hold them responsible. After 8 years of data collection, it was no surprise that plastic made up a staggering 89% of all marine debris materials found during this brand's inventory survey. And some of these survey areas were also popular campsites and fishing spots, which Megan wants me to mention that it is illegal to camp here. So whoever's listening to this, don't get any ideas. But this resulted in some locally sourced trash in addition to what was washing up from currents afar. And during these beach cleanups, team members found a wide array of marine debris sourced from literally all over the world. We identified trash coming from around 36 different countries, and most of the marine debris recovered had either multinational or was identified as coming from the US. And we estimated that around 11% of the debris collected was locally sourced, while around 89% was non-locally sourced. And each item's origin was determined by considering several factors, including item type, condition, brand name, and location. So for example, if we found a metal bottle cap in good condition near a campfire, we can confidently assume that it came from a shoreline user. But if we found a plastic buoy on the swash line with foreign characters and evidence of biofouling, we can confidently assume that it was non-locally sourced. And the most common types of debris found for this study were bottle caps, containers, bottles, lids, and surprisingly shoes. And in total, we identified products from around 283 different brands. And the top 5 of this study showed that Eurocap, Nestle, Crocs, and Coca-Cola and Colgate were among the 5 most prevalent brands in the study. However, it's important to note that until recently, Nestle was the most common brand name observed. However, with just a short period of time, the Eurocap products became wildly abundant. And this sudden increase to the specific form of debris led us to believe that there may have been a container spill, which we have found evidence of before, but with coat hangers, not with these Eurocaps. And when considering which manufacturing companies were the top producers of plastic products polluting our shores, it's important to note that several of these companies belong to larger parent companies, as you can see here. And this just goes to show the sheer size of some of these manufacturing companies. Nestle, for example, as you can see here, has 9 other manufacturing branches, as well as Coca-Cola owning 5 other manufacturing branches. And a wonderful resource, which I'm actually going to assign to you all for homework tonight that you have to read, is the Corporate Plastic Pollution Scorecard of 2001. It's a free online resource, and they recognize that it's imperative that these corporations act with urgency and transparency in curbing plastic packaging waste. And by doing so, they judged 50 multinational companies on 6 different pillars, like as you can all see here, and the results were staggering. There is 1 B, 17 C's, 18 D's, and 14 F's. And I was trying to think of a good analogy for these really bad grades, but I didn't want it to hit too close to home. So I'm just going to move on. So here's a list of the 50 companies that were judged during this survey, and I'm sure that most of you can see a familiar company here. A few that stuck out to me was the first one being Amazon, scoring a D-, a $386 billion company received a D-, which I'm sure it's the holiday seasons. We're all going to be guilty of using it soon. Another one that I found increasingly surprising, which people here in Hawaii especially are going to find this hard to believe, was Costco, which I might have a friend who's here right now who works at Costco. This isn't a personal shot at you. Maybe you could talk to your boss. I don't know. Costco, $167 billion company, received an F. And it's important to note that Nestle and Coca-Cola, which received a C+ and the only B, were among some of the most popular items found during this inventory survey. And wrapping it up, marine debris from around the world will continue to litter our beaches unless real change is made by these manufacturers. And hopefully by conducting this survey, we can show policymakers how important it is to force plastic manufacturing companies to change their behavior. And don't get me wrong, we're all guilty. It is crucial that we as consumers need to make choices to reduce our personal waste. However, manufacturers need to be held accountable for their unsustainable plastic production practices as well. And I believe that surveys like this one conducted with Hawai'i Wildlife Fund is the first step in identifying where action is needed the most. Which leads me to the legislation and policy part of this internship. In my opinion, there's enough literature and evidence to convince anyone who can read that this issue of plastic pollution leading to marine debris is severe. A credit card's worth of plastic a week, folks. Anyways, the time to act is now, and I believe that policy is the weapon of choice. And policies have been implemented in the past to combat our actions. For example, in 2013, a research paper was published on the impacts of microbeads in the Great Lakes. And within 2 years' time, US Congress passed the Microbead-Free Waiver Act of 2015, which prohibits against the sale or distribution of rinse-off cosmetics containing plastic microbeads. And this then led to the UK and other countries following in our footsteps, so it is possible. And Hawaii is a front runner in policymaking, from Senate Bill 2571, banning the selling or distribution of any non-reef safe sunscreens here in Hawaii, which has been in effect since January 1st, 2021. And also the just recently passed Maui Bill 135 to prohibit the sale or distribution of any non-mineral sunscreens, which goes into effect October 2022. And Hawai'i Wildlife Fund was on the front lines of these legislation issues, which made this internship beyond ideal for me. The county of Maui had been releasing 3 to 5 million gallons of wastewater into 4 injection wells daily since the 1980s. That's around 40 plus years that they had been doing this. And these injection wells then make its way into the ocean, which is polluting local reefs with treated sewage. So in 2012, several environmental activist groups, including Hawai'i Wildlife Fund, filed a lawsuit against Maui County for violating the Clean Water Act, claiming that this discharge from the treatment facilities was polluting the ocean and harming coral reefs and sea life. And this lawsuit then went to trial several times for almost a decade, then finally making it to the Supreme Court, which on July 2021 ruled that Maui County did indeed violate the Clean Water Act. The Hawaii Federal District Court ruled that the County of Maui is required to get a Clean Water Act permit for its injection wells and at the treatment facility. And it's also mandating that Maui County invest $2.5 million on treated wastewater reuse infrastructure, which this case is now being considered the Clean Water Act case of the century. And another major victory that Hawai'i Wildlife Fund was a part of was on July 10th, 2020, the Environmental Protection Agency's, or the EPA's, action passed to add Camilo Beach waters, the beach that we've been talking about through most of this presentation, to the list of impaired waters due to the overwhelming amount of trash found at Camilo. And EPA received testimonies from around 19 organizations and 16 individuals during this public comment period. And this just goes to show how important it is to make your voice heard when it comes to these important decisions. And during this internship, I became familiar with the legislative process by attending formal Hawaii County Council and House hearings, all remotely, of course, it's COVID time. And I provided a written testimony on Maui Bill 52 to the to Maui County Council members related to the sale and use of plastic disposable foodware, which this one passed unanimously on the board 9-0, which actually goes into effect next month, January 2022. And after submitting testimony on this and seeing it pass, I felt empowered by making a difference. Cleaning beaches will make you sleep good for a couple nights, but submitting testimony on a bill and seeing it get passed and go into effect will make you sleep good for months. You should try it. Anyways, which led me to submitting testimony on Senate Bill 1298 to increase the advanced disposal fee for glass on the island, as well as submitting testimony on Hawaii Bill 1360 on packaging waste and extended producer responsibilities. And then I wrote several letters to public officials in just about every county that I'd ever lived in about the importance of the Break Free from Plastic Act, as well as the National Bottle Bill. We are the ones who elected these policymakers, and it's their job to listen to the community, and submitting testimony is exercising that power of making your voice heard as a citizen, which I really wasn't familiar with until this internship. And it almost feels like these policymakers almost don't even want you to know about this process of submitting testimony. And next, I was lucky enough to be a part of the planning process for the Hawaii Marine Debris Action Plan, which is a community-based action plan facilitated by Noaa, where several experts, community members, and stakeholders all gather to discuss strategies for mitigating marine debris, which in my opinion is a wonderful way for dealing with any issues, not just on marine debris. Anyways, this action plan covered source reduction, removal, research, abandoned derelict fishing vessels, which is more common than you might think, and at-sea detection of this marine debris. And it's important to note that Hawaii was one of the first regions to adopt this action plan, which has now led to several marine debris action plans across the nation, including the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, Great Lakes, Washington, Oregon, Florida, US Virgin Islands, the Gulf of Mexico, just to name a few. And it's a free online resource that is actually your second homework assignment of the day. So I highly recommend it, and we'll be posting it in the chat after. So education and outreach were major parts of this internship, from conducting presentations like the one today. And I also conducted several presentations with Megan in classrooms, Rotary clubs, and even out in the field during cleanups. I also wrote a few blog posts about this issue of marine debris and recorded 2 different podcasts about this issue. And another thing that I worked on was assisting in making flyers for the new monofilament fishing line stations in order to educate fishers about the impacts of monofilament line and how they can better recycle them. And I also was the host of a conservation talk show called Conservation Conversations with the Garbage Patch Kid. Yes, that was my radio name. And it was on University Hilo radio station, where I would discuss local and global issues in the field of conservation, of course, including marine debris. And I see a few people in the audience who are actually guests on the show, and I see other people who actually listen to it, which I'm very appreciative. Maybe throw a thumbs up in the chat if you're a guest, or if you listen to it. You don't have to. Like I said, it's 2021. I can't make you do anything. Anyways, I want to ask you all a question. How do you imagine that this issue of plastic pollution will play out? From start to end, how would you describe it? You don't need to put it in the chat. I just want you to think about it. The signs of plastic pollution are clear, but we're often too distracted to take notice of it. And it's easy for people to grow apathetic about plastic waste when it's floating miles out to sea or swept away to developing country. It's kind of that out of sight, out of mind mentality. And there's so many issues going on in today's society that's hard to really focus your effort on one specific one. However, plastic pollution impacts are widespread, irreversible, and suffocating. Wildlife will be the first to be hit, and we find our plastic pollution in the trophic web of our ecosystems, and then we'll start to be affected ourselves as plastic is indirectly consumed by humans through contamination of food and water. And then less developed nations that lack the means to deal with the sheer amount and volume of plastic waste will be hit the hardest, and you know who will be hit the most negatively impacted from this issue would be the people benefiting from plastic the most, these producers. And the sooner the majority of society recognizes the consequences of plastic pollution, the sooner that a significant change can be made. And also my time with Hawai'i Wildlife Fund wasn't all just marine debris. I also helped out with other stuff on the county of Maui, including the Hawaiian sea turtle nesting project, which Kelly talked all about during her presentation. So I'll try not to reiterate too many things that she had already said. But during this dawn patrol that we do, we would go during nesting turtle season, and we would walk along these beaches at the break of dawn and investigate for any signs of nesting sea turtle tracks on the beach for both honu, green sea turtles, and honuea, hawksbill turtles. And it's important to note that this turtle that you see in this photo was stuck, so I had to help move it with the supervision of Hannah. However, if you should not be touching turtles on your own, it's important that I mention that for those of you who don't know. Anyways, another project that we worked on was the nesting sea turtle lighting project in southern Kihei, which we'd go door to door from beachfront property to residential and commercial areas, leaving these educational flyers or engaging in discussion about the harms of improper lighting on the coast of these nesting sea turtles. And in Maui, we partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services for the fence repair project, which we worked at the Kalia Boardwalk, repairing and building the fence made out of recycled plastics. And this structure was designed to keep nesting turtles from getting hit by vehicles, which unfortunately has happened before. And this work conducted even made it on the front page of Maui News. And my personal favorite part of my time here in Maui was the Ho'okipa Honu Watch. And during this Honu Watch, we would first count the number of Honu arriving and departing every 30 minutes from the beach, as well as checking them for any markings or tags or signs of entanglement on these basking sea turtles. And additionally, we would record the number of guests on the beach. And then we were also lucky enough to be visited by 2 different Hawaiian monk seals during our hours, one of them which was tagged, which we later found out was born on the other side of Ho'okipa 9 years ago, which I found increasingly interesting. Anyways, it's called Honu Highway for a reason, and I wanted everyone to see if anyone can correctly guess how many Honu we recorded at the time that this photo was taken. And whoever can correctly guess or get closest, I will give them either a Hawai'i Wildlife Fund bumper sticker or a Hawai'i Wildlife Fund hat, which you can't see here, or a signed newspaper article of the fence repair project, which I'm realizing you can't see now. Anyways, you could just type your guess in the chat and I'll announce it on the next slide. However, I should mention that there's around 3 Honu not shown in this photo, so you should add that to your count. And it's also tricky because Lots of these honu look like rocks, and some of them even cover themselves in sand. I'll give you guys a little bit more time to get some good guesses in. So the Ho'okipa Honu Watch was truly an incredible experience from both the marine wildlife on this beach and getting a chance to educate those visiting the beach. I was already smiling cheek to cheek just being able to witness the marine life, and then seeing the reactions of those who had never seen a Honu before, or a Hawaiian monk seal, or let alone 122 of them at once. That was the correct answer. Megan will put it in the chat and we'll check to see who got closest after. Anyways, I would get excited just to see other people so thrilled about wildlife, and then I would engage with one conversation with beach visitors, and then other visitors would see this awkward, sweaty intern with a clipboard yelling passionately about Honu, and then it would attract crowds of visitors, which led me to practically yelling nonstop the entire shift. However, I would go to my next shift fully aware that I'd lose my voice, and I'd gladly do it again. And one of the most exciting things I worked on in Maui was the preparation of the opening of the Hawai'i Wildlife Discovery Center in Kanapali in Maui, which just officially opened on October 20th, 2021, just a month and a half ago. And if anyone finds themselves in Maui, I highly recommend you can tell them that Mike sent you, and they probably won't do anything about it, but you should still go. Anyways, this Discovery Center will allow you guests to become more familiar with Hawaii's unique marine and terrestrial wildlife through education and interactive exhibits, which just adds to Hawai'i Wildlife Fund's impressive resume of how they can educate the community and visitors to safeguard the oceans. So this is Camilo Beach, the same beach mentioned earlier, but however, in this photo, it's not looking too bad. And the work conducted for this internship project impacted several community members and visitors of Hawaii while protecting native wildlife. And I learned that simple actions can lead to dramatic changes on this issue. And our restoration efforts restricted the level of waste entering the ocean, resulting in less marine wildlife endangerment due to both entanglement and consumption of plastics. And through education, we reach out to a wide array of audiences and backgrounds, which is the first major step for any significant change to be made. We can make our voices heard as mass consumers, and we can also make wiser choices with our purchases. Our actions will inspire others to take action, all of which are effective steps in turning off the marine debris tap. Mahalo, everyone, but I'd like to give a few special shout outs. My work in the field of conservation would not be possible without the support of several individuals, so I'd personally like to extend my most sincere appreciation to my mentor, Megan Rose Lampson, for being just such a supportive and selfless mentor during my time in the TCBS program. Her dedication to conservation on our island is second to none and truly encouraging. And her influence on my conservation career will forever be remembered. And I'm just glad that I can call her my friend. I hope we're friends, yeah, right? Anyways, I'd also like to thank the caring and amazing Hannah Bernard, the executive director and co-founder of Hawai'i Wildlife Fund, who is another Conservation Hall of Famer, for her absolute kindness and willingness to host me in Maui. And I'm beyond fortunate to have gotten an opportunity to get to know her. I'd also like to thank the entire Hawai'i Wildlife Fund team for being such great and genuine human beings. I have a saying in the field of conservation, they're really the best, most genuine people that you're going to meet. I'm not biased or anything. It's just what I've observed. And I'd also like to give a special acknowledgement to our wonderful, hardworking volunteers. And I'd also like to thank my advisor, Lisa Canali, for always believing in me and the other TCBS students. Her hard work and passion as an advisor is unmatched. And for that, I'm truly thankful. And also my fellow classmates in this program have been incredibly supportive and kind through this entire process, especially the ones that would destroy each of my papers before I submitted them to anyone. You know who you are. And last but not least, I'd like to thank my family members and friends for their constant love and support. Overall, this program has been a blessing, and I will continue to cherish the memories made for probably the rest of my life. And mahalo, and don't forget that you all have homework assignments due tonight. And if you want extra credit, you can listen to that podcast. But if you're tired of hearing my voice, I understand. And now I will gladly take questions. Mahalo.